Following the introduction of the book God dictated to me as he dictated the Torah to Moses, and each of the books of the prophets written by that prophet. The prophets, because they talk to God and they tell us what God is saying. And that also makes them men and divine beings. Spirit alights upon them, like in chapter 11 of Isaiah regarding the Moshiach. And God is in his spirit. Just two divine beings. And a man. Man and divine beings. Okay, chapter 1. We're redoing the entire book. I had just redone all the chapters, but we've already reposted it about 7 times, and it's already starting to wear a little bit. And I got all my equipment out, so we're gonna do it again. There'll be one more repost of the ones we just finished, and which comes up to 67. It was around 50, but it's all those part 1s and part 2s and 21 part 11 with Rashi. I don't know why I can't get my memory card to just go without stopping. It stops at 30 minutes every time. I just went through every function on my camera and I don't see where any change would be helpful. We are trying to put more light into it. I've moved my light fixture. Okay, the Leper scholar. The oral tradition and the oral law are necessary. What? It's this way. Trying to get centered in the camera. Are necessary for an understanding of the laws given to Moses by the Lord, such as how you keep and observe the Sabbath of Exodus, chapter 31, verse 16, must be determined in the oral tradition. Commentaries on the books of the Hebrew Bible outside of the teachings and laws that were given to Moses by God at Horeb in the Torah are opinions. And there were many disagreements amongst the sages and rabbis of the ancient age and the Middle Ages regarding the prophets and their books. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, generally known today by the acronym Rashi. The acronym is RAbbi SHlomo Itzhaki. He was a medieval French rabbi and author of the comprehensive commentary on the Talmud and commentary on the Tanakh. He's often referred to as the first rabbi to believe that the Jewish people as one man, Israel, are God's righteous servant. Early sages expected a personal Messiah, one man, to fulfill the Isaiah prophecy. One individual man, a personal Messiah. No alternative interpretation was applied to this passage until the Middle Ages. Rashi held the position that the servant passages of Isaiah referred to the collective fate of the nation of Israel rather than a personal Messiah. Some rabbis, such as Ibn Ezra and Kinchi, agreed. However, many of the rabbis, rabbinic sages and rabbis during the same period and later, including Moses ben Maimon, commonly known as Maimonides, and often referred to by the acronym Rambam, a medieval Sephardic Jewish philosopher who became one of the most prolific and influential Torah scholars of the Middle Ages, realized the inconsistencies of Rashi's views and would not abandon the original Messianic interpretations, which of course has been done today by the most noted being Jews for Judaism and Outreach Judaism, that would be Tovia Singer. Tovia's got some 66,000 followers, and I don't know what Jews for Judaism has, but I suspect it's even more, but I'm not sure about that. Rashi's commentary on Isaiah 52, 13 through 15, supporting his position, conflicts with his commentary on the book of Zechariah, chapter 1, when he says, okay, that's Rashi's commentary on 52, 13 through 15, and all of 53. But it conflicts. He says this on the first page of the book of Zechariah, chapter 1. The prophecy of Zechariah is extremely enigmatic because it contains visions resembling a dream that requires an interpretation. We cannot ascertain the truth of its interpretation until the teacher of righteousness comes. Teacher of righteousness is the personal Messiah described in Isaiah 53. So here if that was his opinion, he didn't have it when he was going through and adding commentary to the book of Zechariah. So I don't know when he supposedly changed, or if he had changed back and abandoned it. I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows. The teacher of righteousness, Rashi, awaits, is God's righteous servant of Isaiah 53. He is referring to a particular man and not the people Israel, which would include himself. Rashi is known for inconsistencies in his interpretations. Some of the first written interpretations, or targums, which is ancient paraphrases on biblical texts, that's a targum, see Isaiah 53 as referring to an individual servant, the Messiah, who would suffer. Messianic Jewish Talmudist Rackneil Freiland recounts those early views. Quote, our ancient commentators with one accord noted that the context clearly speaks of God's anointed one. That would be Isaiah 11, the Messiah. The Aramaic translation of this chapter, ascribed to Rabbi Jonathan ben Uziel, a disciple of Hillel, who lived early in the 2nd century, Common Era, begins with the simple and worthy words. Excuse me. Behold, my servant Messiah shall prosper. He shall be high and increase, and be exceedingly strong as the house of Israel. Look to him through many days, because their countenance was darkened among the peoples, and their complexion beyond the sons of men. And this is in parentheses, Targum Jonathan on Isaiah 53 ad locum. We find the same interpretation in the Babylonian Talmud. What is the Messiah's name? The rabbi said his name is, and this is in quotes, the leper scholar. As it is written, surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him a leper, smitten of God and afflicted. That's from the Sanhedrin, 98 small b. Similarly, in an explanation of Ruth, chapter 2, verse 14, in the Midrash, Rabbah, it states, he is speaking of the King Messiah, come hither. Draw near to the throne and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. This refers to the chastisements, as it is said, but he was wounded for our transgressions, bruised by our iniquities. And what you can see here, they have the same problem everybody's had from day one. Nobody realizes all these words of suffering and wounds and punishment, chastisement, have to do with the fire refinement that the personal Messiah, the righteous servant Moshiach, prophet like Moses and Elijah, has to go through to make the many righteous. Elijah makes the many righteous himself. He recounsels sons to fathers and fathers to sons in Malachi 3. I don't know why dipping thy morsel in the vinegar is a chastisement, by the way. The Zohar, in its interpretation of Isaiah 53, points to the Messiah as well. There is in the Garden of Eden a palace named the Palace of the Sons of Sickness. Somebody's making something up. I feel like I'm reading Rambam. This palace the Messiah enters, and he summons every pain and every chastisement of Israel. All of these come and rest upon him. And had he not thus lightened them upon himself, there had been no man able to bear Israel's chastisements for the transgressions of the law, as it is written, surely our sickness he has carried. That's the Zohar, Roman 2, 212, small case A. The rabbis today who believe Isaiah 53 describes the Jewish people have been left to their own analysis in their interpretations, and there are different opinions on how the Jewish people fulfill the verses of Isaiah 53. Rabbi Tovia Singer of Outreach Judaism and Jews for Judaism both believe Isaiah 53 describes Israel. And they disagree with each other in their analysis, their commentaries. This is not unusual. Rabbi Nachmanides often disagreed with Rabbi Maimonides, Rambam. Tovia Singer follows the Christian belief that God sacrifices his children by applying the animal atonement and worship laws of the Torah to human beings. The murderers of the Holocaust is who I'm referring to, who weren't unblemished rams. They were all blemished. I'm sure that all man is. And Jews for Judaism believes in an exaltation by the world of the Jewish people, which is not in the Hebrew Bible. If you want to find any source for it, it's going to be Rambam. It will never happen. The Jewish people were formed by God to test the world. He knew they would hate them. But what do you think is going to change about the Jew that's going to change 2 billion Christians and have them disavow Jesus and 2 billion Muslims and disavow Allah? What do you think is going to happen? His whole commentary is based on that concept, and he still doesn't explain God chose to crush him by disease. Okay, that would be all Jewish people gathered as one man. God afflicts him. That would be all Jewish people as one man. When did that happen? Generally, it happens at birth. God afflicts you. You're born disfigured, blind, deaf, lame, crippled, something like that. I'll tell you what, I've looked at your commentary and you don't address it. What's his name? Kravitz and Skoback. And how about Tovia Singer? How do you get 6 million dead people that are exposed to death but given long life. And how is 6 million of some 20 million in the world or something like that, all the people gathered as one man Israel? And when did they go out and make the many righteous, this 6 million? Or are they just guilt offerings and Hitler is the righteous servant? I mean, that makes more sense than anything. If all 6 million fit into the 53:10 verse that he offered himself for guilt, which is the proper interpretation. Toby is known for his fluency in Hebrew, but he dropped the ball here. If he thinks that says guilt offering, I've got an awful lot of people who disagree with him. And it certainly wasn't a cue from God to go to Leviticus, revive his animal sacrificial and worship laws, which only God can do. It's his laws if he wants to revive them. And then change it, add to the Torah. Puts in human beings. 6 million of them are guilt offerings. Well, it means you can offer any human being as a guilt offering, I suppose. If you can find one that's unblemished. And the ovens of Auschwitz and the other death camps are not altars of God, which is part of the sacrificial system. He should have just stuck with the personal Messiah. Moshiach is coming, and he's the man in 53, and agreed with the sages. And you would think Skobach would too. I can't tell you how many times I've heard him say, or maybe it's the same video over and over. Our sages say. My answer to that is always, what do you say? That was like 2,000 years ago. In a time of illiteracy, no universities, no schools. Our sages say. I'm not saying they weren't great for their time, but you can see Rambam just making stuff up left and right and misinterpretations. I'm sure he was one of the greatest of his time, and a physician to boot. I think in Egypt. You know what he probably believed in this day of medicine and science and knowledge? Putting leeches on people and draining their blood to get a sickness out of them. You got to be careful when you start, idolizing people from long ago. You got to consider when they lived and what they believe. Resurrection of the dead is the other. We believe in a spiritual heaven today. After a period of enlightenment in the common era that is here today through computers, and it's provided for in the Hebrew Bible, chapters 1 and 10 of Ezekiel is a spiritual heaven, shows you a spiritual heaven. The eyes on the creatures and in the wheels of the wheelworks in chapter 1 that become cherubs in chapter 10, but Ezekiel says it was the same vision, rises to the house of God, and God is there. Those eyes are the spirits of the Jewish people in Israel. Doesn't say it leaves Israel, by the way. Might be a good reason to come back, Jews across the world, but they won't. If you grow up in a certain country and neighborhood and this and that, more than likely you're not coming back to Israel. Maybe if you were a very religious person, but most aren't. Only 30% in Israel are observant Jews under the last survey I saw, which is still more than in Christianity. Now, I don't know about Islam. It seems like they all believe in Allah, which is crazy because the Quran came from the angel Gabriel, who does not exist. There is a Gabriel in the book of Daniel, which is not a book of the prophets, but he's a man in a vision. It's the Christians, I think, that turned him into an angel with all the stuff they make up. There's no Lazarus. There's not even a Satan. We've made that point before. I know he appears 3 times in the Hebrew Bible, but he's just story. He's not real. Well, he's not attacking God anyway, because I've been with God for 16 years now. I haven't spotted him coming around. I know in Job he comes and talks to God, but there is no angel Gabriel, which means that statement regarding the Quran, that it was based on information the angel gave Muhammad, and then his followers wrote the Quran based on what he told them. There's a serious flaw in there somewhere. Now, it may not be as bad as the New Testament. I mean, it's awful. What? Prophecy fulfilled. No, it's not. Matthew. And the greatest lie ever told in deceit by the lips of Jesus himself. Now, I don't know how you can be unblemished if you've tricked the world into believing they're sin-free because of your crucifixion. Actually, he never actually taught that. It really comes from Paul and Peter. And, of course, it's believed by all Christians today. He didn't. He didn't say, I'm going to the cross so that the sins of the Jewish people forgiven. And he knew if his cousin was Elijah, he knew they were sin-free anyway, under the covenant that comes to Elijah in Malachi 3. Of course, he wasn't. He wasn't Elijah. It was not the day of the Lord, although Jesus proclaimed it. He wasn't. And how about using Malachi 3, where God says, first verse, I'm sending my messenger before me. I think it's to clear the way. And I am going to return to my temple. Okay, well, in the days of Jesus, and he uses that very verse to describe John the Baptist as Elijah. Well, I got news for you. God was in his temple in the days of Jesus. He wasn't returning. There's so much backward and wrong in that book. It's incredible. The greatest lie ever told, Jesus Christ. He changed it. I've got a video on it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again. Just blatant lie. I mean, it's not even close. Now, of course, I'm saying Jesus. Jesus is a myth. Now, he never existed. It's whoever wrote that gospel decided to change things up because, what did they say? They say, well, look, nobody's got scrolls to speak of. Nobody can read. We can put anything we want in here. And they did. Whoever wrote it. Nobody believes that's the actual Matthew, the disciple. It's too far above his head for fishermen or whatever. I guess that's the reason they say that. Anyway, I've read that. It's got a message, something on Xfinity Wi-Fi. Are we still connected? I guess it doesn't matter. The shortest verse in the Christian New Testament is, Jesus wept. He had just raised Lazarus from the dead, and still the people did not believe he was who he said he was. There is no description of him. It is certainly not Isaiah 53. Judaism does not seem to realize how important a description of God's servant David, a shepherd, is for the building of the third temple. That's me. I'm the man described. He came to me at birth, orchestrated my life to fit these verses, full of egregious injuries, suffering, familiar with disease, crushed with disease, but given long life. 22 years ago, I was told I had stage 4 lung cancer and maybe a month to live, and it was untreatable. Haven't seen a doctor since. 22 years. He crushed me. He told me. He said, I crushed you with it, and then I took it away. He removed it. I said, thank you. Okay, and as I've explained to you, we got 4 righteous servants to come. We've only got a description of one righteous servant, which of course is me. I handle the duties of all 4. I've already handled the prophet like Moses. God dictated this book and another book, my life, to me as he dictated Torah to Moses, which is the unique aspect of Moses. That in the Exodus, but we don't have any reason for that. That's who you look for. You don't look for a leader like Joshua and say, well, he's the prophet like Moses. No. God didn't dictate a book to him, best we know. That it is the book of Joshua. So if you go with the leading character, he did. And God's not going to answer it. Maybe, maybe not. But in any event, he's not the man of Isaiah 53 either. There's nothing in his life that would compare to what I've been put through. The prophet. Now remember, Elijah's supposed to clear the way. He's the messenger in Malachi 3. If Elijah is not recognized, right here, it's my knowledge of heaven you look for. The only man specifically taken to heaven in the Hebrew Bible, and he returns. What do you think that's about? A proof. Ask me something about heaven. God taught me everything I need to know. And for the most part, it's all in this book. How the angel of God's presence was created. How Adam was created. Nuts and bolts. If Elijah is not recognized, his purpose in clearing the way for the Lord's return to his temple will not prosper. And God will bring utter destruction to the land, Israel. God considers himself his creation. Now that's in Malachi 3, his last words. Why there isn't a clamoring to have a temple built in 1948 to today, I don't know. Except your rabbis apparently don't teach it. Utter destruction to the land if there's no temple. And for 70 years there's been no temple. He could have come back in any one of those years. He is back. But he knew the temple wouldn't be built. Because he says so in the covenant of friendship. I will place my temple amongst you. Which, by the way, the covenant of friendship completely refutes a Messianic era. And there's nothing taken into account that when Moshiach is here, that is me, all rabbis have been reckoned with and dismissed before God. And I am the only teacher he recognizes. What do I teach? This book. No rabbi would be in the Messianic era. And they're not going to be in the Jewish heaven because they're not going to be in the scroll of remembrance unless they start teaching this book, particularly Tovia Singer and Jews for Judaism. Because they got so many followers. They got so many people. You can't even begin to say it's not Israel without getting slapped down by anybody who's familiar with 53. They'll have a fit. The prophet like Moses will write the words of God as Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, at the command and direction of God. Orthodox Jews commonly believe that, quote, Torah from heaven is the central tenet of the Jewish religion. This is divinely received by Moses because God gave it to him. In Orthodox circles, it is understood to mean that God dictated the entire text of the first 5 books of the Bible, with the possible exception of the last 8 verses of Deuteronomy. Is that where Moses died? Anyway, to Moses, and then wrote it down. If he is not recognized, and again, that's me, I'm his representation, the prophet like Moses. He speaks to me, I speak to the Jewish people, those that want to listen. If he is not recognized, no one will know that what he writes is Scripture, the written word of God. He wants Judaism out of antiquity and into the modern times. Knowledge. Believe in a spiritual heaven. Well, Rambam's 13 principles of Judaism, the 13th one, is a belief in a resurrection. Well, take it out. Change it. Or delete it. And say, from now, I don't know, do it any way you want to do it. But you should get the resurrection out of it, just like the Christians should tear off the Old Testament and pretend they never attached it to their book. Because that's primarily why God's wrath is upon them today, from Isaiah 51. And mind